You just saw Jennifer Aniston tweeted out about J.D. Vance's childless cat lady comments. I don't know if you saw that. She came out and said, hope your daughter never needs IVF, which you oppose. Lie. He doesn't oppose IVF. He signed on to the Ted Cruz, Katie Britt bill protecting it in all 50 states. So she wanted to stand up for childless cat ladies because she's one of them. What has she said about the women? What did she say about the girl who got her face punched out by the man in the boxing ring? Zero. What has she said about Peyton McNabb, who's suffering permanent nerve damage and brain damage from getting hit so hard in the face and the head by a volleyball player in North Carolina? Nothing. What'd she say about that girl who got all of her teeth knocked out in a field hockey game by a boy pretending to be a girl on her team? Zero. So I don't give a shit what she thinks about J.D. Vance and childless cat ladies. She masquerades as some protector of women. She's quite the contrary. She's never stood up on any of these issues. This is the one she comes out on? You don't want childless cat ladies to be offended? That's where you're gonna plant your flag? I think we need to make the studio brighter. You're in the dark room too much.
Yeah, you might be right.
I'm just saying.
Put some windows in.
When you start to feel like that, I think that's not healthy thinking. That's a dark place to be. It's just too overwhelming. You can't do anything if it's biblical. What can you do? Somebody else is totally in charge and it's not going to end well. Or it will if you're a believer. My son Thatcher was asking me the other day, he goes, when Jesus comes back, does that mean we all die? Those of us who are like alive and here, we die? So we shouldn't be rooting for him to come back soon, right? It's a good question. It's kind of complicated. Let's fight the fights we can fight. Let's manage these things one thing at a time. Let's not take on biblical. It's too big and daunting. We can speak out about the trans insanity. We can encourage people to find faith. We can speak up against the things that we know are wrong and find some good in it. There are things that you can do, and I think that's the key to staying okay.
I'll take that advice. I'll lighten it up in here a little bit. But
most leftists vote for abortion. They're obsessed with abortion. Man, that's a big issue for them. They love abortion. So that's their top priority, and they're voting based on that.
man, like what's happening to these kids?
I know.
And love bombing them into LGBTQ, LMNOP, whatever they're calling it today. It's like there's a recruitment going on in school. Like, how can you be for that shit? How can you be for MAPS?
Right.
Minor attracted persons. No. Are they uninformed? Do they not know this is happening?
This is like the time when we used to lobotomize people who were a little slow. What a stain on our record as Americans and on the medical community. And we're kind of doing that right now. It's the same thing to children. We're not lobotomizing them, but we're sterilizing them. We're chopping off their body parts. We're ending their sex life, any chance at a normal sex life. Most people don't realize if you go from puberty blockers to cross-sex hormones directly, you're probably going to be sterile and you'll never achieve orgasm. What in the actual... And they want to tell us that's informed consent that a 12-year-old can give. It's barbaric. It's evil. The post-George Floyd behavior. The country losing its mind. I was like, these are lies. These are all lies about the police, about us, and they're lies that are tearing at the very fabric of America. And I need to say all the things that need to be said to correct them. My brother is a cop, a great cop. Now he's retired, but he was a lieutenant in Albany. Such an honorable cop the entire time he was in service. He was beaten to within an inch of his life by a gang. They broke his neck. He was in the hospital for a long time. Never came out bitter. He was so upstanding. And to hear these people smear cops writ large as just all racist, all bastards, as they were saying at the time, I was like, bullshit. I couldn't believe those protests where they were making people say Black Lives Matter. This is America. We don't make people say anything. We were being lied to on a massive gaslighting scale.
What did it feel like for you to sit down in front of Putin?
Great. I enjoyed that thoroughly.
Did you?
Yeah.
Were you fearful at all?
Only in one moment. He's definitely had journalists killed. It's a problem. And we actually had a plane on standby because we were worried that something could happen. We sat together, I've interviewed him now 5 times. And it was when I was moderating his economic conference with Prime Minister Modi of India that I got in his face about the chemical weapons in Syria and how Russia had helped fund Assad. And he got really pissed. That was the one thing I asked him, and of all the things that he was genuinely angry about, and you could almost see the switch flip in his head where he went to genuine anger. And I remember being like, whoa, I gotta pull back. I've crossed some imaginary line I didn't know was there, a tripwire. And I did pull back. And enough that he continued to grant me more interviews and so on. But what a dynamic, fascinating, terrible man.
To go over there and put yourself in that situation that takes a lot of courage.
It was crazy.
So, I mean, there's a lot of kids that go through this. It's a big problem that a lot of kids are dealing with. And so I'm curious if you have any advice for kids that are being bullied.
Yeah, if I could talk to the 12-year-old version of me, I 100% would say tell your parents. They can help you. You can establish some parameters like you have to agree not to call the girl's parents, something like that. Your parents can help. And I, as a parent, would absolutely intervene if this were happening to my child in whatever way I could. Because while I do think you can learn a lot from some bullying, like some short stints of bullying, I think it actually creates a more empathetic person, right? You're less likely to bully, I think, if it happens like that. But if it goes on and on and on, it can cause real damage. I still think it affects my relationships.
Really?
My friendships, yeah.
How so?
I'm not good at pursuing friendship. Like once I have a friend, I'm a good friend, but all the friends I have pursued me.
Interesting.
I'm very wary of
People.
rejection and getting hurt.
Some of the stuff I worry about is things like the COVID vaccine. I don't ever want to affect somebody's decision-making process off bullshit that was put out on my show. I feel a huge responsibility to that.
The COVID stuff was very tricky. We were turned on by so many authorities that we were supposed to trust. It's almost like too big to get your arms around what happened there. And I actually think it's one of the reasons why people can't go back there. Like if you do stories on COVID, they don't get numbers. And it's not because, in particular, the right half of the country doesn't have very strong feelings about it.
Yeah.
It's triggering. It's like people are pissed. Nothing changed. We screwed over our kids and ourselves. A lot of us took the vaccine and feel unhealthier as a result of it. People are worried about their children if they gave it to them. So it's one of those avoidance things now. But I did not get all of COVID right. I think I did okay. I'd give myself a B+ on my understanding of what was going on there. But it's very hard when you have so many previously trusted entities lying to you.
Yeah. What do you think the final nail in the coffin will be?
If Trump wins again.
That'll be the end.
Yes, because they'll do the same thing they did the first time. Everything will be negative. He will be the devil incarnate. They will find their oppositional, media roots again, which they totally forgot during the Biden years. Hello? We have a whole White House press corps that didn't figure out he was being visited regularly by a Parkinson's doctor. Do you think they'd miss that with Trump? My point is they had no interest in finding out anything bad about Joe Biden. So I do think they'll just drive more people away. But they're already dying. Their ratings right now in primetime, they're pulling in 500,000. I mean, I know you dwarf that in your numbers, and I certainly do as well. Now they get maybe 1/4 of what they used to get. They make no news. They're totally irrelevant. What was the last news Savannah Guthrie made?
I have no idea.
Of course you don't. What was the last news big interview Robin Roberts had? Who knows?
I don't ever watch it.
Who has more influence, Wolf Blitzer or Ben Shapiro?
Ben Shapiro.
It's just a new world. They're well on their way to the end. It was a priest who said to a friend of mine, people complain, why do I have to deal with the middleman? I want to get an annulment. I just want my divorce to be recognized by God. I don't want to have to do anything after I've done the legal thing. And he said, but those same people, if a family member is dying, I'm their first call to get in there and give last rites. And that's true. My sister died 2 years ago, and when that priest came in there to give her the last rites, it was an important moment. I was relieved he was there. That sounds crazy that I would need a man to tell me I'm good with God after having a divorce that was totally legal and finding a new man who I love and making 3 beautiful children and living in love and harmony with all of us. But we're all raised with these beliefs. It's a form of indoctrination, right? You go every Sunday and you hear the same messaging and you go to Sunday school and then you go to confirmation and CCD, all the stuff. And it's very hard to just say, well, that no longer works for me, so I reject it. It's baked in there.
Yeah, I get it. Is this the end of mainstream media? Are we seeing its demise right now?
Yes. We're living in the end times for corporate media, I guess we'll call it. They're not mainstream. Is it mainstream to go out there every day and say that guys should be allowed to punch women in the face at the Olympics and pretend they're women? That's not mainstream. You and I are the mainstream. They're not. Is it mainstream to say open the borders? I hate that term because it's a misnomer. But yes, we're living through the end times for them, which is a glorious thing. We should be celebrating that. That's one of the few great things we have to think about right now in public life. That and the Supreme Court are the 2 things I wrap myself in like a blanket when I go to bed at night.
What do you think the final nail in the coffin will be?
If Trump wins again.
That'll be the end.
Yes, because they'll do the same thing they did the first time. There was a rising conversation on the internet and elsewhere around Mother's Day by these leftists that we don't need children. More and more women are choosing not to have them. More and more women who have them regret it. And how you really might want to rethink your decision to have them at all. And you had AOC coming out there and saying it might be environmentally unsound and irresponsible. So JD Vance goes out there and says, these people are nuts. They sound like sociopaths. We should not be ruled by child childless cat ladies who don't think children are worthwhile. He was making a point about they want 16-year-olds to vote. He said, if we're going to give 16-year-olds the right to vote, then we should give their parents a heavier weight to their vote, and the single people will have less of a weight. He said it was a thought experiment. It wasn't like, I have a policy proposal. Single people without children shouldn't have their vote counted as much as the married people. And he said, I understand people who want kids and can't have them. That's tragic. But I do think net it's better to have kids because I think it helps ground you and it gives you better perspective on life and your problems. And none of that is controversial. But you didn't get any of that context, the lead up.
When did the media turn to all the lies?
2015.
What happened?
Trump. There is such a thing as Trump derangement syndrome. He literally drove them crazy. They're just so agenda-driven. It's not great to be an ideological journalist. You're much better off if you really don't like either side and you're not in love with one or the other. All these people when Joe Biden was stepping down, I love him, I love the man. Stop that. We shouldn't love our politicians. We should be kicking the tires on our politicians. All of them. Trump too. If you're a fan at home, you're a voter, that's one thing. If you're a member of the media, that's not your job. You're not a cheerleader. They all sacrifice their objectivity to get him. And despite their personal beliefs, could never check it. It's fine to actually privately root for somebody and want this candidate to win, or that's human. But to show it, to openly try to make it happen every night on the air is something very different. And they started doing it in 15. They declared openly that they would now no longer be objective. He's a racist, he's a sexist, he's a whatever. That's not what they were doing. They were reporting night after night that he was these terrible things, that he'd said these terrible things. And they continue to do it. I was very young. I was at the very beginning of my career there, still a reporter in DC. And Roger took an interest in me early on. It wasn't all because he wanted to sleep with me. I think he understood. He had somebody who was a lawyer, who had potential in this business that was unique, and that he really wanted to develop it because, above all, he was a capitalist. He wanted to make money. So he started to mentor me in a great way. He gave me so much good advice I still rely on and miss to this day. I wasn't too fazed by the inappropriate comments about women's looks or this one slept her way to the top, that kind of thing. It came to a peak in his office one day when he grabbed me and tried to kiss me. And I pushed him off of me, and I could smell alcohol on his breath. He came at me again. He clearly didn't get the message. Most men, after one shove off, would know it's a no. Came at me again, and the same thing. I pushed him away, and I went over by the door to get out. He looked at me and said, when is your contract up? It was soon. I remember telling him whenever it was up. And then he came for me a third time.
A third time?
Yeah.
What do you think the key to a successful marriage is?
I definitely think it's using your most generous lens on your partner, trying to interpret all behaviors through the lens of he loves me and I love him. That helps with so many things. And I also think it's important to say the thing that you don't want to say, not to be intentionally hurtful, but we don't really have a lot of conflict now, but when I was on Fox in the prime time and Doug was doing more than his fair share of everything going on with the young kids, he was never like a stay-at-home dad. He always had stuff going on, but he had a job that allowed him to be at home more, and so he necessarily was doing more. He never got resentful really of me, actually. He was always very supportive. He's just a cool guy, but I got resentful of him.
Really?
Yeah, I was like, I don't like that the kids go to your side of the bed in the middle of the night. I don't like when I'm having a one-on-one conversation with them and you come in and join. I need my own one-on-one time with them. Get out. All those things make me feel, even to this moment, like a very petty person, you know? Like, here's this guy, he's doing all this great stuff. Most women would kill to have a more active partner. I had a different kind of problem, and I didn't really give a shit if it made me feel small. I needed to say it. I convinced this guy named Bill Lord, who's the news director in Washington, D.C. at the ABC affiliate, to put me on the air one day a week on tape while I was still working at Jones Day. And I said, just let me shoot a story, put it on tape, and if you don't like it, you don't have to air it. And so he gave me one day a week. He did pay me a couple $100 for the one day. I loved it.
Really?
Loved it. It was exciting. Chasing a story and calling sources and figuring out what's true and then crafting a beautiful script. Tighter, tighter, tighter. Get a better soundbite. Get a better video element, be a better sound. How are we gonna open it? How do we ease them in? What's the moment where we emotionally connect with the audience? What did you make them feel? Is it balanced? Did you offer the rest of the story? Are you biased? Are you taking them too much this way? I loved all of that.
Wow.
And then instead of being like, I nailed it, you're like, I'm so much worse than I thought I was. My dad died December 15th, 1985. I was a sophomore in high school. It was sudden. It was right before Christmas. He was only 45. My mom was 44. And he really hadn't had any health problems. He wasn't an exerciser. In 1985, a lot of people weren't. He had a relatively stressful job. He was a professor, first at Syracuse and then at SUNY Albany. But he loved his job. He wasn't heavy, but he did smoke. And he drank. Not to excess, but he smoked. About a week or 10 days before he died, he thought he was having having some heart trouble, and he went to the ER, and they told him it was heartburn. So he came back relieved. Other than that, there had not been any sort of warning. The night he died, it was a Sunday night. Said goodnight, went upstairs, and I just remember my sister waking me up shortly after midnight saying, "Wake up, Daddy had a heart attack." And it's like an otherworldly, it's an out-of-body experience.
I have a subscription platform. It's on Patreon. They're our top supporters. They've been here since the beginning, and I give them the opportunity to ask each guest a question. What is the best piece of advice for young women dedicated to rising to the top in today's generation?
Don't think of yourself as a woman. Just think of yourself as a worker. My advice to young women is the same as it is to young men. Get in there, do every job, even the ones that aren't yours, even the grimy ones. Don't leave before your boss. Come in on the weekends, volunteer to. Take every assignment, even if you think it's beneath you, with a thank you. When you get positive or negative feedback, say thank you. When somebody gives you any sort of critique, explore it. Why? What did I do? How could I do better? If somebody edits your writing, ask them to have the marked up brief. Let me see it. Well, how did I go wrong? How could I do better? All of it is a learning opportunity. All of that's important to becoming a valued employee or a star or whatever in your particular industry. Whatever's thrown at you by your boss, by your colleagues, the response is thank you.
Wow, that's a great piece of advice. Thank you.